Day 17. You stopped counting the days by marks on the wall a while ago. You count by the pain in your back when you wake up, by how thick the ice is on the fuselage opening in the morning. By the way, the sound of the wind has changed since you got here. It's day 17, and today you finally heard the truth. The battery-powered radio that someone found in the wreckage picked up the news less than 2 hours ago. It wasn't dramatic. Calm voice on a Chilean broadcast informing listeners that the search for Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 had been officially called off. The reason given: impossible search conditions in the Andes, no sign of survival after 16 days. The passengers were presumed dead. You were on a chartered flight that left Montevideo on October 13, 1972. 45 people on board. Most of them the rugby team from Old Christians Club at Stella Maris College, along with friends and family members. Destination: Santiago, Chile, a casual trip. The kind of thing you do without thinking twice when you're 19 years old and your biggest problem is whether the team wins or loses on Saturday. The plane crossed the Andes in an area of turbulence the pilots hadn't anticipated. They were flying lower than they should have been. The right wing clipped a peak. The left wing tore off. The tail broke apart. What remained of the fuselage slid down a snow-covered slope and came to rest between two peaks at more than 11,500 feet of altitude in the most complete middle of nowhere you can imagine. 12 people died in the impact in the days that followed. 8 more died from injuries, cold, and a complete absence of medical resources. There were 16 survivors with a wingless fuselage. 0 food, nighttime temperatures of 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and the absolute certainty that someone was coming to get you. The first days were spent rationing the few chocolate bars and peanut packages found in the aircraft. You ate toothpaste. You drank water from snow melted in an improvised aluminum can. When the food ran out completely, the conversation nobody wanted to have became unavoidable. Paid. The bodies of those who hadn't survived the impact were there, in the snow, perfectly preserved by the cold. The discussion was long and agonizing. It went against everything any of you had been raised to believe religiously, culturally, as human beings. But there was a simple biological reality. Without protein, your bodies wouldn't survive the cold. The medical student in the group, Roberto Canessa, 19 years old, was the one who said out loud what everyone was thinking. That the bodies lying in the snow were no longer the people you had known. That those people were already gone. That what remained was matter, and that using it to survive wasn't a desecration. It was what they themselves would have asked for if they could. And then, today's news: canceled. Presumed dead, somewhere in Montevideo, your parents were called into an office and told the search was over. They've probably already picked out dark clothes for a funeral with no body. Probably already started thinking about what to do with your room. The Andes at this time of year are one of the most hostile environments on the planet. Night temperatures of 40 below zero at the altitude where you are. Winds that can reach 85 miles an hour. Avalanches are common. One of them, on October 18th, 6 days after the crash, buried the fuselage while you were all sleeping inside it and killed 8 more survivors. Quote, you were woken up by tons of snow forcing its way through the roof and had to dig each other out with your bare hands. 16 survivors when the search was called off. 16 people who now know that nobody is coming. The group gathered together. There was crying, there was long silence. And then someone said what needed to be said. That if nobody was coming to get you, you were going to have to go find someone yourself. The problem is that going anywhere in the Andes in October of 1972 without proper alpine equipment, no accurate map, no clothing designed for altitude means almost certain death in the process. The mountains surrounding you rise between 13,000 and 16,000 feet. The temperature drops 20 degrees after 6 in the evening. The distance to the nearest human settlement, by the best estimate anyone could make from the available maps, was at least 50 miles in a straight line, which in these mountains could mean 150 or 200 miles of actual walking. Fernando Parado, who had lost his mother and his sister in the crash and its immediate aftermath, was the one who proposed the expedition. 22 years old, physically capable, even after 17 days of starvation, and possessed of a quality the others recognized as essential. He seemed incapable of accepting that he was going to die here. It wasn't exactly optimism. It was something more stubborn than that. Over the 52 days that followed in the fuselage, the group survived. 2 more men died from delayed injuries. Kind Arrest maintained routines: melting snow, rationing food, repairing clothing with materials salvaged from the aircraft, sleeping packed together to share body heat. At night, the temperature inside the fuselage still dropped to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, even with the opening blocked by luggage. On December 12th, Parado and Roberto Canessa, with a third member named Antonio Vizintin, who turned back early to conserve supplies, began the trek. Carried improvised backpacks made from aircraft material, wearing layers of clothing stitched together with copper electrical wire. They walked for 10 days. They climbed a peak of over 18,000 feet with improvised equipment, believing that on the other side they'd find lower mountains. On the other side, there were more mountains. On December 22nd, Parado spotted a man on horseback across a river in the valley below. He shouted. The man couldn't hear over the current. Parado wrapped a note around a rock and threw it across. The horseman was Sergio Catalan, a Chilean cattle farmer who returned with help the next day. On December 23rd, the helicopters arrived. 16 of the 45 survived. 72 days in the Andes. When they returned to Montevideo, the story made headlines worldwide, and then the world was horrified when they found out how the survivors had stayed alive. There were public moral debates, religious arguments. The Bishop of Montevideo declared that what the survivors had done was not a sin, it was human survival in impossible circumstances. On day 17, when the announcer's voice confirmed that the search was over, you were inside a broken fuselage at 11,500 feet with 15 other people, staring at the same mountains you'd been staring at for 16 days. The difference was that now you knew the way out wasn't coming from outside, going to have to come from within.